Hi, everyone. Welcome to Unfiltered Flow ELSC, the podcast dedicated to the progression of the fluid power and automation industries. I'm Megan Cook. That's Alan Burdett. And today it is our pleasure to have Mr. Steve Fay on. Hi, Steve.
Great to see you, Megan. Hey, Alan.
Hi, Steve.
Thanks for coming on. So, Steve, our favorite question: how did you get into fluid power?
Oh, by accident. I'm going to take you back to 1973. I'm a graduate student. I'm learning not to like what I'm doing, and I just take a leave of absence. And a guy in Cleveland talked me into taking a sales job, and it was something I knew nothing about. No, I'm sorry. I got a job with an air brake company for trucks, and they were developing anti-skid, and I got involved in product development. And 2 years later, and that was great. It was, there's some hydraulics, a lot of pneumatics. 2 years later, we had no product, and I was looking for a new job. And I talked to this guy in Cleveland, and he said, "Why don't you try sales for a while?" And I said, "Okay, I'll give it 6 months." And that was a long 48 years. So it was, I just happened into it, Megan. It was one of those epiphanies, I guess.
Yeah, that's
Like most of us in the industry, just
True.
kind of
Why
fell
is
into
that?
it.
Why is that? There's no engineering degree for hydraulics per se. It's just a sort of out there on its own. It's just how we come to it.
yeah, you would be surprised how often we get similar answer to that question.
I wouldn't.
So you started in 73. That's a while ago.
Yeah, but
Don't mean to age you, but anyway, I've been in it not quite that long, but a bit, and I've seen a lot of changes since I've been in. So I'm sure when you compare and contrast what the industry looked like in 73 versus what it looks like today, can you do a little bit of that for us and tell us how it's changed?
so the big battle in 1973 was Vickers vane pumps against spring governed vane pumps in our little industrial market. We're talking about 1,000 to 1,500 psi, and open circuit valves versus closed circuit valves. That was the state of the art, and that was the battle to be fought. And of course, we didn't have the Vickers vane pumps. We had the other guy, who were charming to work with, but they're a small part of the market. And then we got pressure compensation, not a spring, but hydraulic controlling this. And it taught you the fundamentals of doing systems. And I think that's at the crux of really doing this job well. You see the people that are really successful at it, and they know the system. They know how to play well with others. And you learned that back then. The factories taught you back then. You went to a factory for a week to learn their product and get immersed in their product. You trusted the product. You liked what you were selling. You liked the people you were working with. And I think that's all changed. The loyalty, all the changes that have come about. But when I started, it was very, very simple stuff. And arguably, you could still get killed by a leak, whatever. It wasn't like the stuff we do today, and it wasn't pushing the boundaries of power density and fatigue and pressures that we have to do today. So it was a quieter, gentler time.
Steve, you're talking about training and, um, ramping up after you got started. So this is kind of a two-parter, but when did you have that aha moment where you go, "Holy smokes, I got this"? And how far along were you at that point in time?
Well, the aha was realizing my customer trusted me, and it happened fairly quickly. I was supposed to be in some training, and then one of our guys was in a car accident, so I went to fill in for him, and then they threw a territory at me that was doing nothing. So I was quickly sort of thrown into deep water. Up till that point, by the way, I was working. One of the first things they did is put me out on our test stand, taking stuff apart and put it on the test stands, getting your hands on the equipment. But my first aha was realizing the customer had accepted my ability to help him out. And that's sort of Joseph Conrad stuff. But it's when people believe in what you're doing, you start to believe in what you're doing. You get confidence. And a lot of applying stuff or thinking out of the box is confidence. It's not repeating, it's going out there, learning something else that you don't know and applying it.
How far in were you when this happened? How many years in? I'm assuming it's years, but
Year and a half, year and a half. And it wasn't what I was doing, it was the people I was working with. It was the customers, it was the manufacturers. Sometimes the manufacturer, the guy that invented the product, was at the manufacturer. I remember working with Bob Brundage, who developed the roll seal and roll vane motors, now Van Ruden. He was at Washington Scientific, and he invented this thing in his kitchen. And you spent time with him in the field and saw how he would explain it, and that meant a lot. You really started to understand where this came from. But my first application of that motor, I broke it into a little mining OEM in West Virginia, and the chief hydraulic guy finally listened to me, and he said, "I want you to tell this to the product guy. I want you to tell the product the guy what he should use this." And because I thought I had to be technically proficient, I learned every displacement, every mounting pattern, every shaft, every single and double planetary combination. So he took me down to this guy's office, and I started vomiting all this technical stuff. And the more I talked, the more bewildered this poor engineer looked. And finally, the chief engineer cut me off. He's like, "Shut up." He turns to the guy and says, "Buy this. It'll do the job." And I hadn't asked the question. I hadn't known that torque efficiency at stall was totally critical to them. That's the only thing they're looking for. And I hadn't asked the question. I just said we had this great motor. And so I got all this stuff. So your customers, your manufacturers somehow take you under their wing. I don't know why that guy took me on. He became like a second father to me. But they take you in because they trust maybe you're going to bring something to the table. And I was willing. I'd do anything to get in there. And it turned out to be a very important customer for us. But it started small, and it started with somebody trusting you for a brief moment to let you into what they need.
Yeah.
And those are fantastic. You suddenly realize it's not the equipment, it's the people and what they're looking for that's so important.
Yep. It's a relationship.
And I was really lucky that way. They were so patient with me that I hope I've passed that on.
Well, was there a mentor you had early in your career that helped shape how you approached
Absolutely.
customers or engineering, Steve?
Alan, that's so critical. The older guys within the company I joined, they'd tell you, "Hey, why don't you come out with me for the day? You just see what I'm doing." Or we'd have lunch together, and they'd talk about all the mistakes they had made. We called it the Chart Ass Society. All the mistakes they made and how important it was for them to learn that. And so it made you feel involved with their thinking, how other people did it, what practices were. And you didn't read about this back then. It was just sort of oral tradition passed down. And we're lacking that somewhat today, I think. But it was those mentors at manufacturers. Some of the guys that helped me out, I don't know why, but they just reached out and said, "Let me help you." Head of R&D, and actually was a director of a large company up in Milwaukee. We took on an application in a steel mill using high pressure application for water glycol. And he's down there in the trench with me trying to figure out how we make this thing live longer. He's the head of R&D, the chief engineer. He's a director in the company, and he's down there standing at 8 inches of oil in the trench with me. Those mentors were enormous, and we need to continue to do that.
Yeah.
Encourage the younger people coming up that we've all been there, and the pressure's on. You got to make it work. It's not looking good. You got to just slog through it. Keep on task. They gave us a sense of we could do it, and you made it happen. And your customer expects you to make it happen.
So with the mentors that you had, Steve, and I know this will be a tough one, but what is the best piece of advice? If you could pick one, what's the best piece of advice that you received?
That's actually pretty easy. Get as close as you can to the point of use. People making the decisions are the people that not only accept the system, but they know it will serve their purpose. So whether that's the head of engineering at an OEM, or the main guy making the decisions, or it's the guy using the equipment in the field, you've got to make sure you're aligned with their expectations. So just get as close to point of use. I remember somebody saying, something isn't really sold until it's put to use. That's absolutely true. You can't sit back somewhere in the value stream and expect all that business to keep coming. You've got to get up on it. You've got to help them develop it. And then you've got to go make sure it works. I've spent a lot of time underground in steel mills and foundries and stuff. You got to go see that it works and what can change to make it better. It's a continuum, but get close to the point of use. Find a decision maker that knows what they want and then follow it through.
You've done some pretty neat applications. I mean, you started off, like you said, with vein products, and I know
Great
more
product, by the way.
recently. I know more recently you've done some stuff with like electronic pressure comp and things like that.
Oh yeah.
So, how's the role of hydraulics changed with the rise of something like electrification and automation? How's that affected the industry?
Well, it's a two-edged sword. So you've got all this capability of sensing and following. We first got into this in synchronization, which is a master-slave thing, and how close can you get it, and then get stability and all this other stuff. So yeah, it's always been there that we could use that, but I think today there's a tendency to maybe overuse that, to think that we can make up for in it. We can make up for design shortages, shortfalls, with a little widget that'll make it all happen. And going to that point of use, the guy that's using a machine, he wants the simplest possible solution. Occam's razor. You want to make sure that it's simple, that they can understand it, maintain it, whatever. Good example of this is agriculture. You've got these tractors that are run by satellite and all this other stuff, and they're
Yeah.
infallible and perfect windrows and all this stuff. But if you can't maintain that in the 8 weeks of harvest, you're dead in the water. You know what? The used tractor business is great. You can't find a good McCormick out there. They reacted to it because someone in the process didn't listen to the end user and their expectations. So all these things are great, and they make us more accurate. They make us, I can put a high wall miner in India and follow it, the actual operation. Well, this didn't start yesterday. Fish harvesting in North Sea. Years ago, people that made the huge winches for the nets had a reporting system where they'd squirt back information by satellite phone, I think, or something like that. But they were looking at the temperatures of the motors and so on, and they could sort of do some preventive maintenance from on shore. This has always been an end goal for us, is to get more reliable operation and then knowing when to take it down for preventive maintenance, and so that we have this continuing service of the equipment. We maximize its payback. This has been in the process a long time. We just have some cuter widgets, and some of them don't live up to our expectations. I remember somebody had a thing called Smart Wire a while ago, and it was to be this wiring system. It was sort of a version of CAN bus, but you could plug a three-position switch in the panel to replace what had broken, and it would recognize it, and would recognize what it's supposed to do and talk to. It was never rugged enough for the industrial environment. So we have all these false leads now of these widgets that seemingly can help us, but at the base, we're using them to prop up maybe a design that's not adequate in the first place. So I guess I'm conservative in that regard. And I see people getting conservative about applying all this, not knowing what the end fallibility is in those designs.
Live wire.
Smart wire.
Smart wire.
Smart wire.
Smart wire.
Live wire's me, sorry.
That's right.
I got confused.
This came down the pike from our controls people, and they want us to involve this, and we took it an act of faith that it was going to be good enough, and it wasn't. It should have, but it looks so great. Just plug and play with switches, and everything was interconnected, like CAN busish, but it wasn't ready for production. It wasn't ready for some guy to be mashed his thumb into it, and that's the reality we live with. Is that I call it the two-edged sword. You've got this technology that gets us all this feedback and capability and synchronization and accountability and maybe predictive stuff. But if it's not as reliable as our expectation, it's going to be unfortunate. I think it's getting better. There's some tremendous sensors and things out there, but there's a balance. I guess I'm saying there has to be a balance with what is fundamentally a solid design in the first place. As far as electrification, everyone, I think, worries about segments of the hydraulic business being displaced. We used to make hydraulic winches, 50 horsepower hydraulic winches years ago, and they were pretty rudimentary. That's a VH, that's a motor application today. But there's inherent power density of hydraulics, especially in the mobile market, that make it still a very important part of powering equipment. And we talk about batteries. I mean, batteries are leaping forward, but You don't want to be out of a battery in the middle of a harvest. So you've got to weigh all this convenience and this feedback that we can get with the practicality of the end of use. And that's up to us. That's the cool part.
So, speaking of us, why do you think the pipeline's so thin of young engineers coming into fluid power? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the first thing is they're engineers. They're a mechanical engineer or a chemical engineer or an electrical engineer. They're not necessarily a hydraulic engineer because we haven't really found a way to teach that too well. Because so much of it, as many of your interviewees have said, is experiential. So it's also not that attractive because if you really get into it, you're going to get dirty. Some engineers like that, but a lot of them expect, I think, a different connection with the equipment. We are inherently hands-on. I also think that there's uncertainty. If you look at an engineering mindset, they're looking for certain kinds of certainties or challenges that have a certain outcome. And we don't necessarily offer that. And I think the interesting part about it is if I think through all the truly successful fluid power sales engineers we've had, very few of them are engineers. Most of them are people oriented and can relate what they have to offer to people. So it's not so much technical knowledge as the ability to enunciate what you're bringing to the table so they understand your solution and why it's best for them. And I don't know that engineers get a lot of that. I'm not stereotyping here. There is a mindset for problem solving and applying all the principles and so on. In electrical, there's probably one key way of making a solution. Hydraulics, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. And you've got to get your solution out there and be able to accurately communicate what it does and can do, and then back it up. So a lot of engineers I know and have a lot of respect for, sounds like I'm picking on engineers, they expect to work within a group where they can go to so-and-so for the drawings and so-and-so for the design, these various groups that support them. A lot of successful people I knew in engineering sales engineering for hydraulics are entrepreneurial. They drive the whole process. They want to be in control of the whole process. And some engineers, I feel, aren't necessarily comfortable with that. I've known a lot that are, but by and large, I'm not sure drawing from the engineering pool gives us sales engineers and fluid power.
You sort of, well, not sort of, you hit on this pretty hard to answer in this question, but I mean, just if you could name a couple of skills beyond technical capability that make someone a good, effective hydraulics sales or engineering guy, something beyond technical capability, what would those one or two things be?
Their biggest challenge is to get enough information to put their hands around the problem, analyzing a problem. And it could be analyzing a supply chain issue. It could be analyzing, they just are buying the wrong stuff or they're dealing with the wrong people or whatever, but trying to find out what the problem is. Unfortunately, a lot of our customers don't communicate that well. You sort of got to draw it out of them. So the ability to reach out and get people to talk about, actually getting them to talk about what's near and dearest to their heart is a well-kept secret. They hold that knowledge fairly private, and when in fact they should be throwing it out there. Evincing someone to share that information is sort of a leap of faith. You're asking for them to pull down their drawers a little bit, and it's a matter of, I think, a lot of trust. So somewhere along the line, they've got to find a way to show these people that they can trust them, that it's worth taking 5 minutes to explain to them what they're trying to do. And this is a good example where I totally missed the ball not too long ago, 15 years ago. Doesn't seem like much. We were working on a piece of mobile equipment and they're trying to make it very efficient and respond to load. So we put this load sense pump on there with torque limiting, and it ran horribly. We couldn't put our hands around what the instability was, but it just went nuts. And what we didn't know is that the electrical people on the vehicle who had a battery, and they're trying to optimize a battery, had put torque limiting on the motor. So we had a torque limited motor driving a load limited pump, and they'd go into oscillation. I kid you not, this machine was jumping up and down. Very quietly, I might add, but it was jumping up and down. And ultimately they came back and said, why didn't you ask about it? I said, well, the electrical people were never part of the discussion. The finger pointing began. Shame on me. We have a solution hydraulically, but what other things are you doing on this battery operated machine to make it last 8 hours underground without having to take a hot charge.
Yeah.
I should have asked. That's not too long ago. I should have known that. But so you're constantly learning and you're constantly realigning yourself. I thought I understood this customer and I didn't ask. So putting yourself out there and constantly making sure you're aligned with the goals and with the thinking. They might take your solution and then tweak it and then later on not tell you. And you're the one with egg in your face. It's humbling.
Who would ever take your solution and tweak it, Steve? Come on.
It was so perfect in the first place, Alan. You know, I mean, it's out of the box. It's ready to go. It's a learning curve. So I guess we're talking about the flexibility to continually reshape your expectations or your needs. And that's a really fun process. I was fortunate in that some of my customers sort of made me part of their process and I was sort of family. And that's really cool because now it's not just a job. You're part of something bigger than yourself. So I'd hope for all the sales engineers out there, they find that little niche where it's a good thing.
At the risk of getting you amped up here, what are your thoughts about the consolidation that are going on in the industry now? You know, it's a big topic. There's constant change. It seems like weekly or monthly almost now. So where do you sit on that?
Which consolidation? So we have manufacturers that are consolidating. A lot of little niche products are going away because they were rationalized by some big organization that thought they had already the stuff. I'm closest to the consolidation that's going on in the fluid power distribution. And that is that the little players, let's say little players, the regional distributors are now becoming part of national groups. And I think that's a good thing because you've got to stay up with, it's very expensive to stay up with all the technology, all the market demands. But a lot of these consolidators, I think, have lost their sense of what they bought. The distributors that became part of a large organization were largely bought because they value added. They weren't just passing through. There's no room for pass-through, guys. You've got to add value. You've got to make it work in a specific situation. And that value add is what made distributors grow. And it's what made them attractive to the consolidators. And if the consolidators don't perpetuate that value add, they will lose the very value they coveted in the first place. And it comes down to some very expensive stuff. We talked about training and the time it takes to train someone. And a lot of people starting out in engineering. In fact, my father worked for the same company his entire life. Loyal, company took care of him. He took care of the company. That sense of loyalty, I think, has been changed. And so a lot of people are looking out for themselves and they say, you know, I should really be changing jobs every 2 years to get the experience and get the different stuff. No, you got to keep your nose to the grindstone. A lot of young engineers I mentored, I told them, do not take that big raise. As soon as you're up on the radar because you've done something great, you're going to get nice offers, signing bonuses, all this other stuff. Do not do that. Build your body of work. Build your reputation deeper than that and have that experience and then you'll have your choice. So I think the whole system is failing us a little bit because we have these immediate expectations. It takes 4 to 6 years to launch some guy so he's independent in the field and you could trust it. How do you square that with corporate expectations that are looking a quarter out or a year out? How do you back some guy that's going to take 18 months to develop a new target account and get in there and get on the next machine build, which isn't going to happen in 3 months, and get as much of that build as he can? So he's really got to saturate that project. How can you do that when you tell that guy, you know, how's your sales funnel look for this month? That's not real. That's not what I grew up with. I'll take it on myself. We need to value all that effort goes into developing a new customer. They just don't come to you. You get an opportunity to become part of them. And maintaining that is a huge investment. Here's the other side. You have a really great, extremely successful sales guy. And what does he get? He gets golden handcuffs. He gets a couple of accounts that actually suck up all of his time when he'd be doing all these other things, mentoring other salesmen, finding new accounts, all that. All those other things that they expect of the distributor salesman, I think are unrealistic because they're not willing to invest in it long term. We're so focused on making the stakeholders happy every 3 months when we should be worried about our own herd. So yeah, I think consolidation is good because it could be inherently a stronger company, more leverage. So you not only have yourself, but you have these other departments you can pull on. When I got down to the servo application, I wasn't telling them what the pressure drops were per land on that servo valve. I had somebody else calculate that. I just knew what I wanted. I wanted to know what that cylinder was going to do. You have those other resources at your hand. You can't be everything. Right. And I think I just said something I want to talk about. You can't be everything to everybody. I was the worst cylinder salesman in our company. I sold a lot of motors, but I didn't sell cylinders. I found it boring, just my opinion, but it was also very constrained by cost. And I just couldn't. You're not going to make the kinds of returns on value add that just selling a cylinder that's this bore, this stroke, this rod. I didn't get it. So I'm probably a terrible cylinder salesman, but I was good at other things. You can't be good at everything. Expecting our sales guys to be this jack of all trades is not realistic, especially today with all this other stuff we're talking about.
Yeah.
And you've got to have resources to bring those other things in. So that leverage is what a consolidator can do. They can bring all these resources in, but making those resources available and investing in them, I don't see that enough of that. And we're going to hit a wall. We are hitting a wall right now. Your question, how do you bring people into this industry? There's a lot of stuff that ain't attractive about it. And we need to make it far more attractive and far more interesting to bring in the interesting minds. It's a tremendous business.
It is.
But it's going through some changes.
And the people are the best.
Oh.
I bang that drum all the time.
And remember I talked about learning all the displacements and all the mounting configurations and all the single and double planetaries. It's good to know where to find that, but you have to appreciate the people that give you those opportunities. And successful people in hydraulics didn't do it on their own. It doesn't take a village, but it does take certain people that reach out to them. And in the end, when I look back on my career, it's the people I think about. It's not necessarily applications, but it's the people. And that's really awesome.
Well, hey, Steve, we so much appreciate your time, and it's great to see your face. It's been a minute.
It's been a while. Let's not make it so long next time. I'm still here. I'm still, but it's good to see you both.
Same here.
It was a pleasure working with you in our days, and best of luck to you. I really like your format here. I think you're getting the word out there that this is a very vibrant and interesting business, but we've got to let people know about it.
That's the plan. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
Take care.